you're using. The main thing to remember is to have at least a few inches, like sometimes 3 inches, between your piece and the edge of the box. And Rochelle will talk more about packing heavier things where you do double boxes. I generally don't have to do double boxes for my work. I just do a single box. But you sure don't want it to get too close to the edge, because it doesn't matter how much bubble wrap or foam you have. If your piece is right up next to the edge
and it gets smashed,
it'll get
however,
damaged.
you can get different thicknesses of this board. So you could get a 2-inch thick piece if
That's
you need
right.
to, or you can put multiple layers of this together to build yourself a really good interior section in there to protect your piece. And also, if you are using something like this and you've got framed pieces or paintings that go inside, you want to make certain that the piece that this is protecting, that piece actually fits fairly tightly on the inside, so there's no wiggle room.
Yeah, you don't want your artwork to be able to be
Yeah.
bouncing around within the box.
Yeah.
One thing that I'd avoid, and this is again from experience, you can get this styrofoam insulation. I think it's silver on one side, and then it looks like a styrofoam cooler. It has the little pellets that are all smushed together. Don't get it. You will hate it, and people will hate you.
Yeah,
It's-
they will hate you. Yeah.
As you unpack it, pieces of it come off, and so you end up with that white styrofoam all over the artwork and all over the floor where you're shipping and where people are receiving it. So I would definitely stay away from that. If you have something really big, I do have some really big pieces. I mostly try to send them out unframed or unmounted. But if I have to send something that's really large, that's framed or mounted, I use a wood crate. There is, I don't think I put this information on the list, but if you're interested, just ask a question and I'll find that for you, because I think there's a local person that makes crates. And again, this foam is invaluable. If you've got a crate, you need it big enough to be able to make a whole foam liner for it to help protect the artwork.
Because just because it's a wooden crate, that doesn't necessarily mean that the piece is protected on the interior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You still have to build it out, and the foam is absolutely the best material for that.
And another thing in this, Rochelle will emphasize this even more, but I've been doing it a lot lately too, is that if you're sending work for an exhibition and there's anything tricky about the kind of tube or the kind of box that you're using, the way it opens or what side you want people to open it on, make sure you include instructions, and sometimes I email instructions too. And let's say you're in a jury show and they want you to, a lot of times they'll say, please send this in reusable packaging. That means your packaging should all be more or less the same. Don't put like this and this and this and to use space.
And people in general hate to get packages where there's a mixture of materials, and so I try to stay pretty clean about that.
Try to say
material
as consistent as you can, and also take photographs of what it should look like packed, so that if they have to pack it up and send it back to you, they're not going to remember. So this way they'll be able. It really helps them a lot.
And if you don't do that, then there is a possibility your piece might come back damaged, and it won't be because of the actual transportation of the shipping. It will be because they did not get it packed the way you know it needs to be packed, so that it can actually make the transit okay.
Yeah. So I think you talk about 3-dimensional, and then we'll talk about shipping.
Yeah,
We'll talk about some shipping options for CASA.
So
Let me get out of the way.
And of course, since we don't know who's in the audience here, we don't know how large your pieces might be that you may be shipping. But, and also just about packaging work too. I wanted to talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's one difference is that my work, I don't have to package too much.
No, just, but if you're doing smaller work, like I make jewelry, and so my work is smaller. So maybe I want to send it out with some kind of a nice package. When they open up the box, that the jewelry is inside of that. And you might do that even if you have smaller ceramic pieces or just small three-dimensional works in particular. You might decide that it's worth it to do some kind of nice packaging. But the one thing I want to stress with that is you have to really think about how much you have sold that piece for. And whether the packaging might be too expensive for the amount of money that you are selling the piece for. And it maybe cuts into your profit too much. So think about that before you decide how fancy you want to get with the actual packaging. I have brought some different things with me that are boxes that I have used over the years or that I'm using now. And they all cost various amounts, and they all come in different sizes. And what I have brought is fairly small here. But I brought this really cool box that I happened to find in my studio that I bought a bunch of these many years ago in Germany at a trade fair. They're beautiful. They've got foam liners. The shapes are fabulous. Everything about them is really, really wonderful. The exterior slide pieces came in different colors, so I ordered them in different colors. They were horrendously expensive, very expensive, but very, very cool. So only special pieces were shipped in these boxes. Only pieces that I sold for a considerable amount of money did I send out in a box like this. Now, I have all other kinds of boxes that I use today, and sometimes I'm just sending pieces out in pretty plain cardboard boxes that I order in various sizes. And this is a pretty small one, but I can get them much bigger. I like to, when I'm shipping things, I like to put individual pieces into a box, even if it's going. So if it's going to a gallery and they're going to be showing the work, they truthfully don't care that you have a fancy box. And in fact, I would say 90% of the time, if you get that work back, you don't get that fancy box. You don't get this nice box back. Okay, they just take whatever's there and they pack it up and it comes back. So I tend to buy, these cheaper boxes that I can pack work in, and I can pack pieces in individually so that I can keep them from moving around inside my bigger box.
So Rochelle, if you have a show and you're sending like 5 pieces to a gallery,
I'll have 5 boxes.
5 boxes. So each one is in its own box, so they don't take one out and throw it in.
Exactly right. And in the box, when you open it up, it says 5 boxes inside.
Mm-hmm.
So very important, because I've had galleries when I was younger and I did not put those lists inside the boxes. I learned my lesson because I had a gallery throw a piece of gold away. Well, not a piece of gold, a piece that was made in gold away. And they found it. They went digging through the garbage to find it. But that was my mistake for not putting an inventory list big on the inside as soon as they opened it, saying there are 5 pieces in here, there are 5 boxes in here, whatever. So make certain you do that. Some boxes I have here are actually photo boxes, and that is on the list. I have bought these 3 boxes here from B&H Photo, and they have a huge range of boxes that you can purchase. Now, once again, they're not inexpensive, and they're really, really well built. And so certain kinds of pieces, I would decide to maybe send those out, and they would be more presentation boxes for whoever was buying the piece. I even have this really fancy box right here that I have. Once again, it's an expensive box, but it's pretty great because it folds down to nothing and I can store it, and flips back up and makes a nice box that happens to have magnets on it. But once again, expensive. So sometimes also when I have been shipping work, and if it's maybe a major piece, and I can't find a box that fits it just perfectly. For some reason, I want for it to, fit fairly snugly. I'm sometimes concerned about my work that if it moves around, I pack it really tight. But if there's any kind of there will be some shaking in transit. You can't avoid that. So sometimes I do just build my own boxes out of foam core. And I usually put a picture of the piece on the front side of it so that when it goes to a gallery or show, they know that when the piece comes back, it's got to come back in this box. Now, I wanted to show you a fancy box that I have here and why I actually did this. And then I'll talk about packing this in bigger boxes. So
Maybe we should talk about the kinetic piece
and
too.
we'll talk about the kinetic one too. Yeah, absolutely. So many years ago, I did a whole series of pieces out of gold. They were terribly expensive pieces to build and very expensive for people to buy. And I realized through shipping that even with pictures, like throwing pictures in the box, that they weren't being wrapped properly to ship back to me. And I was getting damage from museums. And that really upset me, because it would mean that I'd have to go back in and rework a piece. And I thought, well, that's my fault then. It's not their fault. If a museum can damage a piece then in shipping, then it's something I'm doing wrong on my end. So I decided that I was going to work with a bookmaker, Priscilla Spittler, and she built boxes for me. They were terribly expensive. They were at the time like $300. This box here cost me $300 to have built. But it was really important to me that the piece inside get shipped and show up and be perfect and come back to me and be perfect too. So this is a box that hopefully nobody would throw away. Very carefully designed. And there's a large gold bracelet on the interior here. And the piece, as you can see, because it's everything's moving and shimmering here, it just floats on a base that was custom built for the piece. And the whole idea was that when the box was finished and done, the piece could move like this and do that for days on end in the FedEx truck or whatever, and no problem, and unpack it, and there it is. So it's an absolutely perfect fit. And I've never had one damaged since then when it's been shipped out. So it was clearly worth it. And so then in shipping something like this, because the box to me was rather precious, having to pay $300 that's a whole lot of money. But so in shipping something like this, I take butcher paper because I know that it's not going to, or glassine, either one, and I wrap it in the paper, whether it's butcher or glassine. I wrap it and tape it down nice and tight. And then I have, when they go out, I build boxes that are out of foam core and this one is not the correct box for this, but that fit nice and snug. This particular box fits nice inside there. So it's, I know that it's going to arrive just fine. So let's say that I have this piece ready to go. Then what would I do? I actually would then take this, and I would only do it because this is a really expensive piece. So if I have something that is horrendously expensive, I am going to double box big on the interior. But that's also why I have smaller boxes and I put those inside as well. So something like this then would go into a cardboard box that's just a little bit bigger, doesn't have to be a lot bigger, maybe just an inch around it, that I would pack with bubble pack, or I would pack it with popcorn, something like that. And then I would put that. So I'm taking a piece that's like this, and because it is really expensive, I'm then packing it in a box that it's almost triple boxed. Yeah, and it really depends on what you're shipping out. So if you're shipping out pieces that maybe have a retail value of $50, $100, $200, I wouldn't go through all of that. But these pieces, because there was so much gold in them, I didn't want them to be lost. So I didn't want it to be a smaller package. I wanted it to be a fairly sizable package. And then in a box that was this large, I always, when I'm shipping, if it doesn't weigh too much, I want to have a minimum of a 2-inch border all the way around, top, bottom, everywhere. So even if I have, I have all these boxes and I ship those together, I would probably put them all together like this. And I would put them inside a really big box, and I would float it through popcorn, and with a good, at least a minimum of 2 inches top, bottom, all the sides. And if what I was putting in the box, if it's fairly small like this, but it's pretty wavy, then I might build out my box walls, this right here, with the insulation board. And I would just build out top, bottom, and the sides of insulation board, put popcorn in, bubble wrap, one or the other, and then float those boxes on the inside. And I know that I would have a really, really sturdy container to work with. So now if you are shipping, we should bring your piece over soon. So if you're shipping much bigger pieces, it gets trickier. It can get trickier. Let me just use all of these out of the way here.
So this is a globe that has a drawing on it, and it's kinetic. It can move all around. And I have had a bunch of these in the show in El Paso, which was easy, but then I had to ship them to a show out of town. So of course I had to ask for ship.
Call me because I'm sort of the expert 3D person.
Expert
She's the
3D
expert
person.
2D person. And
So we had to figure out how to stabilize it
yes,
and how to ship it safely. And
right.
since then, I've used those same boxes and shipping methods maybe 3 times.
And
They work fine, and I always get compliments from museums and everything about how wonderful. So the first thing, I don't think that was first.
Well, we did. We put the
Like
glassine on, but we actually put it
that's
underneath
right.
so that it just stays right on
Yeah.
the low part.
On because they're charcoal drawings, so they're delicate. So we at first covered it very closely with glassine, and then
And we lined it up, and there's a little space right in there, and we use these foam pieces.
we use these foam pieces because if you're doing anything that's kinetic, you can't just
stabilize
wrap it.
it.
You have to
Right.
totally stabilize
Yes.
it. And this has all kinds of ways it can move. So we used the foam and inserted this tight enough.
Yeah.
And this we could do it right on the surface too, because we already had glassine on the surface, so we could work it. And I'll do just a tiny bit right there.
We also
Where
then
it was stiff.
we also took the foam and we wrapped it around the bottom.
Yeah, because these are old globes that I'm using, so
They're very fragile.
They're very fragile, and that looked like a delicate spot that
Yeah.
maybe could be that could break off.
So we actually wrapped it with foam, not just tight around here. We actually kind of
We built
made
like
it,
a
we
cup
built sort of
around
a cup around it. Then that went into a cardboard box that we built out with the insulation foam.
With the insulation board, so the
And-
whole thing was
yes.
built out
We had
in
a
a
big,
structure.
we had a big fat, like a 3-inch piece of insulation board on the top that came down over it,
With a slot in it
a slot
that held
to
that.
accommodate for that slot right there. So we made really tight little slots so that this couldn't move. And it just fit into the insulation board slot right there. So you have to really think about, what's going to happen when you're shipping with pieces, and how can you stabilize things that are really delicate.
And with pieces like this that were going to a museum show, I knew they'd be coming back.
Right.
And so we sent maybe 5 or 6 photos of the packing steps.
Yeah.
Because if you just send one photo of it all packed up, the people are not going to know how to get there.
No, and
How
they're
to
not
get to that spot.
That's right. And they're not going to take the time to photograph it so that when they can repack it,
No, when they're
That's-
unpacking it, they
yeah.
don't ever think about that.
they don't. Yeah. So there's just a few other things, and we're going to move on to pricing, but just a few other things.
Oh, yeah,
talk
about
about shipping.
so you pack, now you have your work all perfectly packed.
Right.
How do you send it? Well,
So you can do fine art shippers, and that will cost you your first child,
yeah.
basically.
I remember the time that I was at kind of a well-known artist studio one time, and he said, I got to ship a show today. And I thought, well, he's not packing anything. And he had the shippers, they came in, they packed, they had white gloves on, they packed everything for him, blanket wrapped everything and took it out. But it doesn't happen that often.
No, we both had that happen a handful of times, and but it rarely happens. But when you have big things that need to be shipped that are maybe too big, so your general shipping companies are USPS, FedEx, UPS, that type of thing. But if you have something that doesn't fit within their size guidelines or their weight guidelines, you then should call a local commercial trucker and just get a quote from them, and it's going to go in there with whatever else they're shipping.
In that
And
case,
so
I
it's
would,
really packed.
it has to really be packed.
Probably
That's when you need a
you
crate.
need a crate, because they're going to they might drop it off the end of the truck. You never know. You don't know. So you have to be prepared for all of that. But it's pretty inexpensive. And when you have really big things to ship, it's the way to go. So if you're shipping with USPS or FedEx or UPS, and you do a lot of shipping, you can contact them and you can set up an account, and you can talk with them about the fact that you plan on doing quite a bit of shipping. And with that, they will give you better prices on your shipping, all dependent upon how much you might be shipping per month. It's based on how much you're
Yeah,
going to spend
and it
with
can
them,
be,
basically.
there's no cost to set up an account. It's pretty
No.
easy. And like I have a UPS account, and I shipped some work the other day, and the initial price that the retail price was, if you just went to not even a UPS store, but if you went out to UPS and shipped this, it would be $90. And I was able to ship it for $72.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty good discount considering that I don't ship every week.
So it's worth looking into. The other thing that we wanted to mention, talk a little bit about, was just briefly about insurance and insuring your work for shipping. And Susie's fortunate because of her studio. She's able to get a rider on her studio insurance that will
Yeah,
pay your insurance.
so I have a shipping rider which covers my work from the time it leaves here until the time that it arrives at wherever it's going, gallery or museum. And luckily I've never had to use it, but I have pretty good coverage. If I had a huge show going out, I would probably ship in 2 days, because I do have, it's not worth it for me to have a rider that's as high as maybe a whole show would be if it was a major show.
And because my studio is separate in my house, it's a whole separate section of the house that was specially built as a studio, that they're not interested in giving me that kind of insurance rider, because it's not a commercial building. And so,
So I think it has to be, it's like a separate address.
Separate address in order for your insurance company to do that. So disappointing. But the other thing too is that the shippers all have different limits. Some shippers will not ship art. Other ones, USPS will ship art. They will ship jewelry. And I believe that they'll go up to $50,000. FedEx, for instance, if you ship jewelry with FedEx, they'll insure for only $1,000. So you need to figure out some other kind of a rider with it. And truthfully, I spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars insuring my work over the years. I do not insure my work anymore. It is cheaper for me to just try to do a 1 day or 2 day shipment if it's a really expensive, work that I'm sending out. It's just much better to do that, and I've not had any issues. And my favorite shipper these days happens to be
The post office.
The post office,
Yeah.
yeah. I like their rates and everything. And so just lastly, and then we probably have to move on to pricing,
Oh, yeah.
but if you insure a piece And if something happens, they damage it, they lose it, then of course you can put a claim forward, but this is really, really important to know. And they are not very upfront about this, but let's say that you ship something out for $500 and they lose it, and you say, hey, you lost my package for $500.
Even if you haven't insured for that.
Right, yeah, and you've insured it for $500. If you don't have a track record for selling similar like pieces for that kind of money, and you don't have invoices that prove that you have sold works for that kind of money, they won't pay you. They will not pay you that, what you think the piece is worth. So you've got to get a track record going. And I've had to do this. My galleries have had to do this before, where, something has happened and it's like, I've had to contact the gallery and say, can you, send me some things that prove that you have sold pieces like this for X amount of dollars, or I'm not going to be reimbursed for it. So just keep that in mind. Many, many, many years ago, I had a graduate student that sent an entire show out through FedEx. It never arrived. It got lost on the dock somewhere. And she had insured all these photographs that she'd done for like $20,000. And I think she got $1,000 out of it because she had never actually really sold any work before. And so she couldn't provide, they'll let you buy the insurance, they'll take your money.
Yeah, they don't want credit for that.
Exactly.
The other thing that I would add is that if you're shipping work to a gallery or a store or something like that, that's taking, galleries take 50% commission. So if you're shipping something that the gallery would sell for $1,000, but they're only going to pay you $500, you only need to insure it for $500. You
That's
don't
right.
need to insure it
That's
for
right.
the full $1,000, because
Right.
the gallery is not going to, they're not going to, shouldn't get any of the insurance.
Absolutely. And make certain you always keep your shipping receipts just in case you need to file a claim. So I think with that, we're going to move over to your location.
Over to another location and talk about price and work.
Okay, so we have a long history of doing collaborative work for over 20 years now. We collaborate occasionally on things, and we consider these two chairs to be our office.
Yeah,
And
right. So we want to move over to the office
Yes.
to talk about pricing.
Yes.
Pricing is, I feel like, one of the most difficult things
Absolutely.
for artists, and continues to be a difficult thing at every level of your career.
Right. No matter where you are in your career, you're always guessing, is this the right price or not? Is it a little too high? Is it a little too low? Whatever. There are some basic things to keep in mind for pricing. Cost of materials, the time that you spend making the piece, the cost of your studio equipment, which of course that studio equipment probably will be with you for years and years and years, and it will get used over and over and over again. So you might want to take a tiny little percentage every time you sell something and add that into the piece that you're selling to, because at some point you might need to replace a piece of equipment or add something new to your studio. And then just your monthly cost to operate your studio, which is might be your rent, utilities, insurance, maintenance of the studio, equipment, basic supplies like paper towels.
Like paper towels and all the shipping supplies.
Right.
So those are things to consider, but
There's a huge but.
There's a huge but.
Big but.
If you're just beginning to sell, you may not be able to cover those things right at first, because it might make it work too expensive.
Yeah.
So you have to start doing a lot of homework. Think about what other artists that are at your same level are selling similar work for. And by similar, I just mean ceramic bowls that are around this big or something like that. And we all know that there's such a huge range in art in terms of pricing.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is based on the amount of
experience that someone has
Yes.
and what prices their work can get.
And you can figure these prices out by, going to art shows and seeing what they're selling for, going to museum stores, going to galleries, and you can kind of figure out where people are in their career along with that too. And
I guess a lot of you have probably participated in Los Artistas before, and so you've seen work that's of a similar medium or something like that.
Right. And then take a look to see what they're selling the work for, and are they successful at those prices, or are they not selling anything at all?
That's right.
Then maybe they have more years experience on you, but their prices are too high. And to me, I think to Susie too, there's absolutely no greater thrill than to have somebody want to buy your piece and to live with it. That's the best. And
Absolutely, I
Yeah,
completely agree.
yeah.
And if you're just starting out in selling work, sometimes it's worth it to have your price be a little bit lower. So that you have work that's accessible and that a large variety of people can buy it.
And then you can start, your reputation starts to build, and you can gradually inch those prices up, just gradually bring them up a little bit, and perhaps start covering more of those expenses, maybe give yourself a better hourly wage. I mean, that's another way that I think a lot of people look at it too, like how much do you want to make per hour?
Right.
And
yeah, you think
it's
about
tricky.
our work is obviously very different. My materials are usually not too expensive if I'm doing a drawing like this giant drawing behind me. But if I'm working on monotypes or etchings and I'm going to a print studio in Austin and paying master printers and paying by the week to work there, it can get really expensive. So there's a lot of variety. And then Rochelle's work is just her materials are really expensive.
Yes. So the bracelet that I showed you has around 4 ounces of 18 karat palladium white gold. That's a lot, it's a whole lot. And so obviously I've been in the business long enough now to have, through my galleries, for them to have built up collectors that are, willing to sometimes purchase something like that. So that gives me some money to keep making.
And I think one thing that happens as you continue to make work, you get smarter and faster at it, especially if you're working on a series or multiples.
Yes.
Or,
Yeah.
Well, a series or multiples of things. And so you figure out almost, I won't say an assembly line, but you figure out ways to get smarter and faster. A good way to do it is kind of keep track of your hours so that you have an idea how I'm going to make, 6 sets of earrings, or I'm going to do, like I did my 7 small drawings for a show.
Right.
Keep track either in your mind or actually keep really track on paper as to how much time you're spending so that you have an idea
What it's taking you.
What it's taking you. So exactly.
As seasoned as both Susie and I are, we still do that. We still kind of keep track of how much time it's taking for us to make something. And I started doing that when I came out of graduate school, and I knew that I wanted to start engaging with selling my work, and I realized that I worked so slow, unbelievably slow, and that I was probably making a $1 an hour for these pieces that I was making.
Well, your pieces take so long.
They take so long. They really did the work I was doing then. And so what I actually did is I thought I've got to get much better, much quicker at this. And I put a piece of paper on my bench. And when I would come into the studio, I would clock in the time. And when I left, I would clock it out. And I started making, instead of just an individual piece, I started putting groups of pieces together and maybe doing 4 or 5 pieces and doing the same process with each piece. So gradually moving them along closer and closer to being finished. And then eventually I had all 4 or 5 pieces finished. And I took a look then at my sheet and I added up all my hours, and I divided the number of pieces into the hours. And that sort of told me, how many hours it took per piece to do something. And by working that way for a couple of years, I got to where I was working smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And
because I was working smarter, things were taking me so much less time to do.
I do the same thing
So,
even with drawings.
yeah.
And with drawings and prints, I work on many at once. And then maybe when you're getting toward the end of a piece, you just work on that.
Yes, yeah, to get it finished up, you know.
And now something really, we're running a little out of time and we want to give time for some questions, but something that's really important is that if you're selling both to collectors or to individuals and selling to galleries,
Or like a museum store,
Or a museum
design
store,
store,
a
or
design
a
store.
boutique, or anything
anything
like
like
that.
that, anywhere where
Yeah.
it's kind of a retail place,
Yeah.
it is essential that you keep your prices the same. Otherwise, you're competing against the stores, the galleries. If you sell your piece for $50 to somebody and the museum store is gonna sell it for 100, and they find out they won't
They'll
carry
send all
your
your
work
work out,
anymore.
yeah, they won't carry it anymore,
And
so,
same with galleries, with
Yeah.
big ticket, even big ticket things, so.
Yeah.
So keep your prices the same. Consider it like you're a wholesaler almost,
right,
and,
right.
and you're selling this retail, so.
But now, if you decide that you're always going to sell your work and nobody else is gonna sell it for you, then that's great, nobody will ever get a cut, you know, you'll do your art shows and pay the fees to get into the art shows,
Right, and
or
if you
you're
sell
selling
online or
or
whatever,
something like that.
yeah, then that's your
But-
price. But if a gallery approaches you and wants to carry your work,
You're
you'll
gonna
only
give
get
them-
half of that.
Yeah, if you're lucky, maybe they'll only take 40%, but most
Yeah.
places take 50%. So a couple last things that just need to be mentioned. First of all, if you do decide to sell work through a gallery or through a store like a museum store or a design store, and you need a contract, and usually they have one and they send it to you and you sign it, but it is imperative that you absolutely read every last bit of that contract. And we both have friends who have not done that in the past.
There's all
Boy,
kinds of horror stories.
Have they,
There's
Yeah.
good resources online if you just look up art and business. There's good resources, all kinds of articles
right.
about what to look for in contracts.
yes, yeah.
You know,
And
that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's something that we could cover, but it would
it would take
it would
forever.
take us too
Take
long.
forever. But just a couple of things with a contract. It's not unusual for a gallery to say, if our really good collectors want to buy something, we'll give them 10% off. And we expect for you to take a 5% hit. We'll take 5%, you'll take a 5% hit. That will be in the contract. Make certain you read so that you see that, so you're not shocked when you get a check in the mail and it's 5% less than what you thought. And also, a young jeweler that I know happened to have a bunch of work at the Museum of Modern Art Design Store and was completely shocked when work sold and she got a check for 20% less than she thought she was going to get. She hadn't read in the contract that they can decide if they want to put a piece stuff on sale. And if it goes on sale, that the artist eats it all. They eat nothing. Okay, so they got their full amount, but the artist got a hit for 20%. Make certain you read your contracts.
And if it's something you don't like, talk to them about it. Because sometimes
Absolutely.
you can strike it and say,
Yes.
I can't do that. I can
Yes.
only give a 5% discount or
Right.
something like
I,
that.
I have often struck things out in contract and just chat it with them. You know, you can't do that so much when you're really young and starting, but afterwards you can.
Yeah,
Down the road,
exactly.
tiny bit down the road, you can start doing that. So.
So thanks. I guess we
thanks,
should
and
take
maybe we have-
questions. Yeah, if anybody has any
Maybe
questions.
10 minutes worth of questions at the most.
Yes, we have a few. The first one comes from Ale Carrillo Estrada. Have you used any third-party shipping insurances? If so, what do you recommend?
Third-party shipping insurance, like,
Just, well, that, like, for instance, with jewelry, there are a few companies out there that you can buy insurance through.
oh, have you done it?
I have not done that, no. I never have done that.
I've never done it.
And usually, probably, it will be very expensive for one thing. It'll be quite expensive. But if you're shipping jewelry, it would be something that you might, if it's really, really pricey, it might be something, if your piece is really pricey, it might be something you would consider doing, so that you could get the insurance value that you would need for it. But there are some of those companies out there, I've never worked with any
Yeah,
of
I've
them.
never done that.
And some of those companies might make you do like a whole year, like you pay a whole year fee with them.
It would be best if you read them.
Okay.
There's a couple.
Okay, we can, let's see. I hope to start selling my fused glass items online. Do you have any experience with spray foam insulation to stabilize very fragile pieces? Oh boy, no, I have not done that before, and I would be really careful with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really
I've
would.
seen it. I mean, I've seen boxes that have it, but
Yes.
I don't know enough about it
No,
to try.
I guess what I can say though is that my oldest brother was a glass artist for a number of years, blown glass artist, and his pieces sold for really, nice sums of money. And he never ever had the pieces break because he would wrap them really well with bubble pack. So if he had a piece that was this size like that, it would be this big in bubble pack. He would wrap it multiple times around, and then he would take a piece like that and either, depending on the weight of it, he would float it inside popcorn, or he would build out a box with the insulation and fill that in with either the popcorn or more. He tended to use more bubble pack with it, and he would just build that out, but he would just do multiple layerings of the bubble pack. And he he sold and shipped all over actually for many years, never had any issues with it. So I would probably suggest going that route as opposed to that spray.
I just am not
I
familiar
worry
with
about
it.
that,
Yeah.
yeah. How gradually do you think one should sell your work? I see people selling here locally really low. Should that be the norm, then go up? And that's a good question, actually.
Like how gradually should you raise your prices, or should you?
Yeah, kind of. But also the one thing that I do see in El Paso quite a bit. So if you want to just keep your work in El Paso, and that's going to be your market, then you really probably have to keep your prices within what other people are doing, and get yourself a good following going where people really like your work a lot, and they just have to have more, and gradually bring those prices up, and you can leave everybody else in El Paso behind with their low prices because you have built this really nice local
You built a
following.
clientele,
You've got that
yes.
clientele. And so I kind of know what you mean, because you go to some of the, I don't know, just different places where you can go and you can see work. You think, my God, that's really cheap. How can you make any money on that?
Yeah.
And you think, well, but that's what they're going to pay for in El Paso. But I don't think you should always stick with that mindset that that's what can be, what El Pasoans will buy.
Yeah, I think that gradually is the key to it.
It is.
And I don't think it's bad to start selling your work.
Right, at
low
whatever those
prices,
prices
yeah.
are, to try to get some of their clients to become your clients,
Right.
basically.
Michelle and I both taught professional art practices, and I remember students saying, well, I don't want to undervalue my pieces, and I don't want them to be selling for what people won't value them if I'm selling them too cheap.
Right.
And I mean, I guess there is too cheap. You wouldn't sell.
But
You probably
you
wouldn't
wouldn't-
sell
you wouldn't-
a $20 painting or $5 earrings,
Right.
unless they were quick enough to do that for you.
Right.
But beyond that, I feel like if you start out at a price that people like your work and they can afford it, you can raise it as you get more customers.
And you can, let's say that you get, 20 or so sales, maybe your work is only selling for $30 to $50 in that range, but you get 20 or so sales, then, well, maybe that $30 piece then becomes $35, maybe after, or it becomes $40 maybe after a year or so,
Yeah, so you can raise it, I mean, fairly quickly. It can go up every year if your sales are,
and the demand is
and the
there.
demand is there, yeah.
The big problem is if you start too high, it's really hard to lower
That's,
that down.
that is right.
Every artist will tell you that it's just too hard. And it is, to me, it's better to just get out there and get some sales, even if you're making $1 an hour for your time. Just get some sales going. Get some people that just have to live with your work so that you have a sense of success and you can show other potential clients out there that, well, but I've had a lot of people really interested and people talk too, like collectors talk, whether they're local or they're outside.
And people see
And
your
they-
jewelry
and they go,
on other
"Oh."
people, or they see one of your pieces
Yeah.
in someone's house or your restaurant,
Right.
and the exposure is important.
Yeah, and so maybe 3 years later, somebody comes to you because they've seen your work on somebody or in somebody's house, and now they're having to pay 20% more than the person, or 25%
That's okay.
more, which is good, you know? Yeah, so don't overprice to start with, and then as you start getting some sales, start inching those prices up. There's more. There's more. Let's see. What do you do when your wholesale prices are the same for every gallery, but some decide to sell pieces for more? Yeah, okay, example, wholesale 50, retail 100, but they sell it for 150. Well,
Do they give, they probably are still only giving you,
it's $50.
$50.
Probably.
that
Yeah.
happens a lot with galleries in
New
New
York City.
York, because
Right.
I think that they want
They're-
for their rent, and also
Yeah.
they give big
Big
discounts
big discounts. Yeah.
to designers or whatever, and who
Yes.
expect those discounts.
That's right. So the places where I've run into it over the years is New York City, like, you know, the gallery I had there, and London, you know, so it has to be really, really big art markets where they might have a monthly, for a small little gallery, their monthly rent might be $20,000 a month, $30,000 a month or something like that. And they're good collectors, they have to give a 20% discount to, 25% sometimes.
Right.
And so I think the key here is that you need to okay that with them. You can't just let them do that and then you find out about it. You need to negotiate that ahead of time and decide whether you're okay with that or not.
Yeah, and sometimes
So-
it's just the way it is, and you just accept it. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's just like, well,
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
Right.
And sometimes they'll say, well, why don't you raise your prices a little bit? And,
Yeah. And you can, but
And
then
you
you need
can.
to raise them across the
but
board.
yeah, but at that point, you have to
Raise
raise
them
them across the board.
Yeah, definitely. Just really briefly, many years ago, I had an example with a gallery in New York City, and they wanted to do that. They wanted to put, I don't know, 10, 20% on top, I guess. They were going to make my prices that much higher. And I said, you know, I can't do that because I have other galleries around the country in, you know, kind of major places, and they're not doing that. And I negotiated with them. They wanted my work bad enough that they agreed to keep my prices level with the other galleries. Now, I was in the business long enough that they were willing to do that. If I had been younger, they would not have done that, and I probably would have said, fine, I would like to show with you. You have a much bigger audience of collectors, and I need that right now.
I think it a little bit depends on what kind of work you do, because if you're doing work that hangs on the wall, they expect it even more because of working
They do.
with interior designers.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But now one thing that is not good too is if you have a piece that you say that the retail is $100, so you're going to get $50 for it, and then you find out later on that they sold it for $150. It's first of all telling you that your work needs to go up in price, that you're selling it too cheap because they can get the $150 for it, and they're also not being honest with you, and you need to have a big talk with them and decide whether you want to keep working with them or not. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's our last question. And I think we've answered everything here.
Are there more?
Oh, there's more. Oh, geez, I didn't go up. Okay. Do you think it cheapens your labor intensive work if you sell it alongside inexpensive bread and butter pieces? Or is it good to appeal to a wide range of people? You know, I have
Hard question,
I have
yeah.
kind of a strong opinion about that a little
Well,
bit.
Yeah,
I think you should separate it out, actually.
I think it's better separated out. I
Yes.
agree.
I think so. And maybe, create a different name for your bread and butter production stuff. Put that under something else. So for instance, if I've done some kind of production type things over the years, and I always sign it as, my middle name is Renee, so I sign it as Rochelle Renee. My last name doesn't go with it. And so every now and then I've done something like that over the last 40 years. But I think it's important that you keep it separate, because I can tell you this too, that rarely when you put it side by side, does that expensive piece might help you sell the cheaper pieces, but the cheaper pieces will not help you sell the expensive
Exactly.
pieces.
And it's,
Never.
it's
Never.
very, some of these things are personal decisions, and I'm sure you all do too. I have a lot of friends that right now are doing all kinds of cell phone cases and masks and,
Yes.
all kinds of objects like that. And I'm asked probably once every 3 months or something to do giclée prints for hotels. And for me, it's just not where I'm interested in taking my work. If I'm doing, I've done production work, like small drawings,
Yes, yeah.
lines of small drawings, and that seems okay to me, but I'm not interested, because I don't think that a general collector or buyer knows the difference between a limited edition print of 20 pieces or a giclée of 100 pieces,
Right.
so much. And so I separate that. And same, if I'm doing masks and all, I would just make some for my friends. I think
Yeah.
it's okay, but I think it's good to
Or
separate it out.
just, like how.
Don't make it look exactly like your other work.
Exactly. Definitely. So do we recommend doing special discounts to encourage more sales? Should art really be on sale? Well, you know what? That's kind of a tricky thing.
That's
because
tricky.
if you say it's on sale, and I think it depends, like if you're doing production work, then maybe occasionally having like a Christmas sale and, saying, 10% off.
Yeah, I think if you're
Um,
selling, if your main market is selling retail, like if you're doing,
Yeah.
doing that or selling online, I don't think it's bad,
I don't
because
think so.
I think it
Yeah.
encourages, everybody likes a sale.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
So,
And, mostly my work sells through galleries, but I do have a few collectors that have bought lots and lots and lots of my work over the years. And they don't go through a gallery anymore. They come directly to me because they have spent so much money over the years between galleries and between myself. Whereas I used to always keep the prices level, but I've got a couple of collectors like that have spent so much money that I do give them like a 25% discount, because they might have 30 of my pieces, they have a whole lot. And so, and I don't see that as a sale.
but that's not like a
That's just
sale.
a discount.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Has the pandemic economics affected art buyers' capacity to invest in art?
Yes.
Yeah.
Big time.
We're both suffering a little bit from that right
Yeah,
now.
it's,
We're not seeing quite
a
the
lot of
sales
things
we
that were
used to.
pending fell through because
Yeah.
people suddenly had, just other concerns for their money.
Yeah. I mean,
They had to
everybody,
spend money on it.
here's one of the things that I found very interesting in my particular field in the galleries that I work with, which never would have happened pre-pandemic. But you can go to the websites now and you see that they are putting some of their artists' work on, like maybe more of the work on the websites, and they're actually listing prices. So I'm going and I look at the websites and I see that they want this particular piece and it's $20,000 or it's $30,000 or it's $2,000. And in the past, it was always inquire with,
Yeah,
call us
Yeah,
up,
there
just
was
inquire
never-
for price, inquire
yeah,
for price.
things were a lot less forthright. It was a lot less
There
clear.
was no transparency there.
Yeah, so.
And,
so I
but
think that's
now
changed.
they're having a rough time. And I think also that they don't want to mess around with phone calls of people sort of fishing for prices. And, knowing that they've called on a piece that's $10,000 and the person who's calling is hoping it's maybe $500. you know,
Exactly.
yeah. So, but I think that that's our last question. So I hope we gave you a lot of information to work with, and Laura has one supply list that she's going to send out to everybody, which should help a little bit.
Yeah, so all the shipping supplies that we were talking about will be the websites to get them, or if it's local places, we've listed all the local places that you can get stuff. Remember, collect everything. If you get any kind of furniture or appliances, or if you get a new TV, those are fabulous.
Yes,
you get
those
great
inserts.
The inserts are wonderful. Collect all that stuff and stick it somewhere because you'll be able to use it.
Yeah, you'll definitely be able to use it. So, and if you're new in your business, start your prices low. Get yourself a group of people who are buying things, and gradually inch those prices up. So anyway, thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us,
Enjoyed it.
and good luck to everybody. We look forward to live Los Artistas show next
Absolutely.
year.
It's one of our most favorite things that we absolutely love to go to. We love to see what everybody's doing and come and bring our pocketbooks with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and support. So,
Great.
okay.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.